everyone online for joining us as well. We were just having a few conversations this week on Instagram because we've been getting so much great feedback, week one after our main event of the year, our biggest event, which was also the biggest of our biggest events. So much great feedback that people had a really great time and that they're on a bit of a high from it. So we thought it'd be nice to, to connect with some of the attendees there and to all come back down to earth together and reflect on how we found the conference. So really great to have Dr. Rachel Brown join us tonight. She was also at the conference, and so she can kind of reflect with us on what some of her key takeouts were that she took away from the couple of days that we were there. It was a lot of information over those 2 days. So probably what I'll do first of all is just say, if anyone who's with us would like to ask questions, please put it into the little speech bubble, or if you just want to make comments and, add your takeouts to anything that we're talking about, then please do that. But then I'll probably ask you to introduce yourself, Rachel, for anyone who's not familiar with you and what you do, and then I'll ask you some questions about what you thought.
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently an NHS psychiatrist. So I've been working in the NHS for, about 20 odd years now. My son was actually asking me this morning, Mum, how long have you been working in the NHS for? So I had to think about that this morning. But yeah, I have a particular interest in metabolic psychiatry, and I'm also trained in functional medicine. So I'm very much into the holistic health and naturopathic type treatments too. So that's me.
And you're also online as well, doing quite a lot of podcasts and videos and trying to get the message out.
Yeah, and then actually very shortly, so I'm going to be working with Ali Houston, and together he and I will be providing metabolic mental health coaching for people who are interested in using metabolic approaches to improve their mental health. So that's at metpsy.com. So we'll be doing that.
Yeah. That looks really great. I can't wait to see how that's going to work as well. So I don't know how it happened, because you and I were communicating before the conference, but somehow we managed to never see each other.
I know.
All these people that I was planning to meet, and it probably didn't help that I was running around like a crazy person. But it was a shame to miss meeting in person. We're going to have to do that at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, there were some other people I didn't manage to speak to either. So like Jen Unwin was one of those people who I've spoken to remotely before, and I was looking for her during some of the breaks, but there were so many people at the conference, which is great. But it was just really difficult to track people down during the intersessions and breaks.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good sign in a way, because we had over 400 people there, and when you came out during the coffee breaks, it was like buzzing and a very full reception area. So it was actually not too hard to miss people. So I thought maybe we could do a little trip down memory lane and go through some of what you took out of the 2 days. And maybe go through it day by day, so we can kind of cover some of the topics themselves that were covered on the first day. So we started off obviously with Ben Bickman, and we moved on to a lot of discussion about type 2 diabetes. We then moved on to cancer, and then ended with Alzheimer's. So it was quite a lot packed into that first day. What were the key takeouts for you, either just the morning session, maybe to start with, Rachel?
Yeah, so I don't know, it's probably unfair to some of the other speakers, but in terms of Ben Bickman, I just think you don't get a better speaker than Ben. And if anyone hasn't listened to him, they need to go online. And even he posts lots and lots of different useful reels around metabolic health, even on Instagram. But I'm always very envious of his students that he teaches at university, because they probably don't quite fully appreciate what a master educator he is, and just very down to earth, but he really knows his subject in terms of insulin resistance, everything to do with insulin and metabolic health. So it was lovely to hear him speak in person. I think a fair bit of what he spoke about I was fairly familiar with, just because I've looked and listened to so much of his stuff. One thing that jumped out to me, is probably just because of some of the research I'm involved in, was to do with semaglutide or Ozempic, so those weight loss medications, the GLP-1 medications. And I think the takeaway for me was that there's there's a lot that's far from ideal when it comes to pharmaceuticals, even down to those types of drugs. So the thing Ben spoke about was particularly about how people who take those medications end up increasing the number of fat cells that their body has ultimately, which is just such a bad thing in terms of metabolic health longer
Yeah.
term. So that was something I didn't know beforehand.
And he was very passionate about wanting to talk about that message, so we made sure he got that question because he
Yeah,
obviously had something to say about it. And yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of coverage about the GLP-1 medications, and I hadn't actually picked up on anyone who said that the number of fat cells increases when you come off it. And so that was really insightful, and I hope that message gets out more. I mean, obviously, we know that people regain the weight after a period of being on it, but and also what they lose when they do lose body weight is they lose a lot of lean muscle mass. So those are kind of messages that are starting to come through, but I hadn't appreciated the point about the fat cells. So that was really great that Ben managed to really passionately land that point, didn't he?
yeah, definitely. And I think there was some statin discussion in there as well. That might have been in the sort of panel discussion afterwards, but I always love to hear stuff about statins because they're not my favorite medications by any means. So I think yeah, it wasn't just Ben's talk. It was throughout the course of the 2 days. There was a bit of a theme coming through just about how natural health methods tend to be superior ultimately than going immediately down pharmaceutical routes. So
Absolutely, definitely a theme. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, any other thoughts on day one with the diabetes session or with the cancer session? That was our first time actually covering cancer, so we're very excited to bring that message out
Yeah,
and have those
yeah.
topics of
So
that discussion.
yeah, I was really excited that Dr. Sophia Clemens was there from Paleo Medicina. So I've been a huge fan of their work for a long time, particularly some of the stuff they've done in the past in terms of reversing type 1 diabetes early on in its presentation. And she didn't specifically talk about that at the conference, but she went more into their treatment of brain cancer and people with glioblastomas. And that was just all really interesting to listen to, particularly thinking about their Paleolithic ketogenic diet approach that they use, which is essentially a very well formulated carnivore diet. So yeah, really nice to hear about their case studies. But probably the thing that stood out for me most was with Andrew Scarborough, his talk about his own experience of receiving a brain cancer diagnosis, and
Yeah.
gosh, just the horrific way in which the NHS handled that. Really, that really struck
Mm.
home to me. Because I have an interest in medical ethics, and it just really, yeah, it's just really uncomfortable to sit and listen to how he received his diagnosis,
Yeah.
just over the
Yeah.
phone and on a Friday evening without any support, and just it
Mm.
just really made me sit back and think, doctors and people in the health profession need to think more about the people they're seeing and the actual impact that some of these discussions have on somebody's life.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so I think,
how did you receive that as a someone who works in the NHS and maybe has to deliver some of those messages sometimes?
yeah, so I don't know that I don't generally have to tell people news that's as serious
Is that
as what
mm,
what he was having to hear that day on that phone call, but certainly um, that was difficult. I don't want to get too political about this or say anything that's going to cause issues at all, but I think I've had a lot of concerns about how things have been handled just the last 2 or 3 years, and um, I yeah I'm coming from a place where I think a lot could be done a lot better in terms of the medical profession more
yeah.
generally. And I think his story just really hit home
Mm,
about how people could have a lot more compassion, but also genuine interest in somebody's health, because part of his story was that when he was recommended treatment, it wasn't really for his benefit. It was more for out of the interest of the clinicians or the unit and their statistics and data. And
yeah.
that just was horrific from my point of view when I heard that. So it
Yeah.
was really hard to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this is, I mean, a lot of the people who support us are absolutely from the NHS, and all of this is to just be able to have the conversation and be open and to collaborate and to try and shine a light on where we can all be better together. and that's really how we as PHCs see it. So yeah, Andrew's talk was very hard hitting for probably a lot of people, and then the final session was on Alzheimer's on day one with Patrick Holford, and then there was a panel discussion on that. Did you have any thoughts about what was coming out and the messages about Alzheimer's?
Yeah, it was interesting. So Patrick Holford's obviously an amazing speaker to listen to as well. He knows his
Character.
stuff. Yeah, absolute character, and that always is. It just always makes things go down well when you have somebody entertaining to listen to. And yeah, so for me it was the sort of DHA, so like omega-3 fatty acids in the diet and the B12. So that was really interesting. It wasn't a particular angle of research that I was all that familiar with. I mean, obviously we know the importance of both of those nutrients in the diet, but I've always been coming from a insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, metabolic type approach, and so yeah, it was really interesting to hear a different angle to it. I probably, whenever anyone speaks about Alzheimer's, I want them really to focus as well on insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, and that did come out in the panel discussion as well. And obviously, Dr. Georgia Eade was speaking the following day. But yeah, it was interesting to hear a different perspective on Alzheimer's.
Yeah, and I think that the theme for the whole thing really is that so much is underpinned by the state of your metabolic health. Almost every condition you go through, it kind of comes back to the same answer, the same roads. It all leads to just having, in a way, it's really powerful, because it means as somebody who wants to control their health, they actually don't have to worry about 20 different diseases. They can just worry about controlling one aspect of their life and their nutrition. So I think it's a really positive message in there, but people are just not making the connections enough. So we need to step through each condition and say, look, it's the same story, and this is why. So hopefully that was coming through for people on that first day, because they were all different conditions that we were going through. So and then yes, you mentioned day 2, which kicked off with Dr. Georgia Eade, who I know will have been a particularly interesting special one for yourself. So tell me how you felt about that session.
Yeah, so Georgia Eade is just a complete trailblazer in the field of psychiatry, and particularly metabolic psychiatry, and I'm lucky enough to have trained with her already, so I know her. And so a lot of the stuff she spoke about was very familiar to me. But however, there was one specific point that came out that I hadn't been particularly aware of, and that was just in relation to linoleic acid and the brain, and how the brain actually burns or uses up linoleic acid, and it directly contributes to increased oxidative stress. So that was the real take-home point for me from that talk, and that was really, really nice to hear. And I think she also had some really good slides on placebo effect in terms of psychiatric medications, and there not being a huge amount of difference between placebo effect and individual medication response. And that's a nice one to hear too, because I think that gets very lost in the field of mainstream psychiatry. So in terms of the continuing professional development that I would normally be expected to go to, there really is very little, if no, focus on metabolic health there, and it is all very pharmaceutically driven and focused on what medications you can add into what. And I'm a member of a critical psychiatry group and network in the UK, and there's lots and lots of articles and books and viewpoints that are communicated within that group, but it doesn't necessarily make it back to the mainstream psychiatric population of psychiatrists. So it was just nice to hear that message about placebo effect communicated just in a straightforward manner, that people could take home.
Yeah, that's great. And did you, I mean, given that was your specialist area, was there anything else that you think would have been a great message to add, or that you'd like to have seen brought out more, that you'd want to flag now?
Yeah, so I mean, nothing else that Georgia could have done on the day, I don't think. So it was a really nice, accessible talk that she gave to people. But
yeah,
I mean, all the, there's so much evidence and basic science pointing towards the fact that mental health conditions are very much related to our metabolic health. And sadly, there aren't that many professionals in the UK, certainly, but I think I think arguably worldwide, who are all that familiar with that fact yet. So I think we need to do more to get the message out there. And obviously Chris Palmer is doing a lot in the way of promoting that message. And there is research ongoing now, and research that will hopefully be funded in the near future to convince other psychiatrists that metabolic health is integral to having good mental health. But yeah, that's the message really. And it just really, it's such a source of frustration for me when people underestimate the impact that metabolic health can have in terms of mental health. People just look at you as though you're crazy, for want of a better word, when you start to say that actually what you eat can have a profound impact on your mental health, even if you have a significant diagnosis like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or any other severe and enduring mental illness. So I always, I pretty much always speak to people about food choices now in consultations, and give them information to go away and do some of their own research on it now.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And it's so great that we have people in the UK who are really pushing forward with that and trying to get the message out there here as well. And for anyone who's not aware, Rachel, you also presented on behalf of PHC's launch event in Scotland about 2-3 months ago, I think now. And that was a really great talk that you gave and explained the gut-brain link. So if anybody wants to check that out, that talk that Rachel gave, it's on the Public Health Collaboration YouTube channel. We released it just a few weeks ago, so that's also another great resource to check out, alongside all of the talks from this conference that will be coming. But that one's already up, so feel free to have a watch, anyone who's interested. So yes, that was the mental health talk, and then we moved straight into food addiction, which was a panel led by Heidi Guyver, and there were a few different people on it, but I think that was a really great discussion about food addiction. What were your thoughts on that panel?
Yeah, good discussion. I think probably for future conferences we might need to have a separate talk as such, just on the topic of food addiction in its own right, because I think it's an absolutely massive topic, and there are obviously some people really driving that forward now in terms of Jen Unwin and the great work that she's doing there. But I think it's such a huge topic, it probably deserves its own focus on another day at another time.
No, you're totally right. In fact, last year, I don't know if you're aware, but we had our conference in Bristol, and the day before was a dedicated food addiction conference, like a fringe event to the main conference. And that's something we're thinking about doing again for next year. So it absolutely is 100% something that needs kind of more airtime and people to appreciate on kind of complexities of it a bit more. So this year, because we had done such a dedication on it last year, we had it as part of a panel, and then on the Sunday of just last week, we also had another fringe event on food addiction, and a lot of local people from Sheffield were invited to come along and understand food addiction. And it was a really great morning after event, where you got to just see it really kind of at grassroots level, and people taking on all of these food addiction ideas for the first time and filling in these kind of diagnostic questions that Jen was putting around to everyone, which really does hit home, I think, and helps people appreciate that, hang on a minute, this could actually be an actual addiction, rather than just me just being weak and not able to control myself. So yeah, I totally agree with you, and it needs more airtime, and hopefully that will be coming with next year's conference too.
Yeah, I would love to have been there to see people's reactions when they filled those questionnaires out, because I think it's more common than we're led to believe. So
totally, it totally is. And then what was next? Oh yes, then we moved on to the sports panel, which was Can You Outrun a Bad Diet, which had a few different interesting people on it. Is there anything you wanted to tell us, or what you thought about that panel?
I don't have any particular take home messages from that specific one. I think that's one of the ones I probably need to watch again post event, because I got to the point where I was going over some of the previous talks in my mind at that point. Yeah, absolutely. So, but I mean, it was a really great panel, great lineup, and it was interesting to hear different perspectives, and people coming from very different sports backgrounds, and talking about some of the food and some of the food addiction type issues even within within some of those sports.
Yeah, even the Olympics themselves. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
great to see, I think just so many athletes from different backgrounds and different walks of life, and they most of them on that panel were fueled by fat, and when they have taken on those physical challenges. And I think that's an important message as well, because that's again very different to how people see sports and how you have to view yourself as sport. So hopefully that did come across for people to take away as well. And then yeah, two more panels. One was, do we need to eat plants? That was our 2 hour slot that we had debating that topic, which I'm sure would have been of interest to you as well.
Yeah, I think that was probably my personal favorite of the 2 days.
It did have a lot of energy, I think, in the room as we were about to start.
Yeah, yeah. I did feel as though I was on the right side of that panel, I have to say. So I think Sean Baker and Anthony Chafee just did really, really well putting their arguments across, and it showed. And the other people did well as well, but I think there were some things said in some of the talks that, like bringing out the China study, for example, that was something that just really made me feel quite frustrated. So I was thinking, oh gosh, I've got some things I could say about that.
Yeah.
And I know Frankie, who was on last night, I think she'd mentioned something to do with that
Yeah.
as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the reason we wanted to, I think I mentioned as well last night, to have that conversation and to really, and kudos to Dr. Chidi for coming along and making his case, is because people out there, when they are, of the understanding that they shouldn't be eating processed foods, immediately, move away from that. But then what is their choice to do next? Is it to be more meat heavy or plant heavy? And I don't think it's easy for people to decipher all the information, which is so contrasting and so polar opposite in its position, as to which is the best route to go down. And I'm hoping that it's helpful, or we're hoping that it's helpful for people to see all the information laid out against each other. So when you hear about the blue zones, what does that mean in the context of someone who may be more pro meat, and how do you reconcile all that information? And hopefully, at least with it all laid out, people will start to be able to kind of form their own opinions more easily. So that's what we were really trying to do with it. But obviously people do have a preference, and especially in our crowd, have probably got a bias in one direction. But that wasn't the idea of what we were trying to do. It was just to put information out there that we think will be helpful for the general population. So, but also I think it was a fun session that people quite enjoyed as well, and it had everyone quite high levels of interest going all the way through.
Yeah, it was really fun, and I think if anything it probably could have gone on for another hour or two longer. That would have been really interesting to see where that went, although maybe not for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people might have grown tired of it eventually, but yeah, I certainly would have sat through another hour or two of that one.
But we had 29 questions that we didn't manage to cover.
Oh god.
So we could have, and when we were planning it, we thought 2 hours is a long time for one topic, but we kind of knew it was still also not going to be enough. And I think we were totally right, and you're right that we could have gone on to other topics in that same topic. We could have gone on to other sub areas as well, because we only covered fiber and saturated fat and evolution, and even that we really struggled with. But yeah, there's definitely other areas we could have covered as well. So yeah, maybe there'll be some more at some point. but yeah, we're glad. It seems to be that everyone's very interested in that one. So we're glad people enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll be watching it when it comes out.
It was good. It was all good humoured as well, because I think it has the potential to become fairly divisive, that sort of debate. But no, it was really well received on the day. So no,
we were really happy with it. And then the final one of the day was Are Cows Destroying the Planet, which was chaired by Jane Buxton, author of the Plant-Based Con, and had a few other kind of representatives from the kind of agriculture farming areas discussing what a different perspective, I think, on this idea of emissions from our food sources. What were your thoughts on that one? Did you have any takeouts?
Gosh, it's just such a vitally important topic. So I was really glad that was included, and that we were able to hear from people with a history in the farming industry and regenerative agriculture, and looking at standards within that industry, because I think it's just a constant uphill battle with lots of misinformation gotten, for want of a better word, out there in terms of the mainstream narrative, and we're just being bombarded now, left, right, and centre about plant-based agendas and climate change. And I think there are a lot of different angles to those arguments. It was really nice to be able to have an opportunity to hear from people actually within those industries.
Yeah.
And somebody with an overview who'd obviously written I haven't yet read that book, but it's on my list of things to do. But somebody who's obviously really well researched in that area and has put together a whole book all about the plant paradox. So yeah, very, very interesting, stimulating discussion.
It is, and it's a great book as well. I'd definitely recommend it. And Jane did an amazing job on it. So yeah, I mean, if anyone wasn't there and just has been listening to this conversation, you probably had the impression that there was a lot covered, and that would be right, because there was quite a range of topics, every metabolic illness, or most of them anyway, and a few kind of offshoots to the whole discussion. And it was, I think, a very full-on but very fun couple of days. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think I posted somewhere on Instagram that it felt like such a come down afterwards. I don't know what it must have been like for yourself, as in being somebody integral to the organization of such a big event. But it was just such an enjoyable experience. And I think it's a very self-selecting population who go to these things. So it's really nice to be in a room with people all with similar interests and a lot of common knowledge, I suppose, in relation to how important these topics are. So.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, you're right. I think I'm still trying to come down off the wave of it, because it has been, a lot of activity to actually get it all set up and happening. So I probably have a slightly different perspective on everything. I need to go and watch it all again, because I wasn't taking it all in. I was thinking about too many other things, but all the feedback so far has been really great. And if anyone did come along, you should have an email to request your feedback, and we'd really appreciate if you could fill it in, because it will help us with planning next year's and to try and make it even better than what we just achieved. So I think, a lot of the comments that we're getting is that people really appreciated the kind of energy and the vibe of it. And I do notice that, even in previous PhD conferences, we seem to have a different level of enthusiasm, both from the people who are presenting, the people who are there. It's not like any other conference where, there's kind of a big sponsor, and there's kind of messages that are being delivered by any kind of corporate. This is all coming from a very small charity that is, happy to put the big messages out there and to try and speak as much of the truth that we can about nutrition. So we think it's very special and a very different kind of type of event type, because we're a very different type of charity. So we hope that people did enjoy that aspect of it, and would see that as a reason to kind of come along next time, because the kind of connections you make are really, the people that I met this week, not including yourself, unfortunately, but everyone else. There are so many people that just make, I keep thinking about it and start giggling to myself. And there's so many funny characters and enthusiastic people that just want to get on and change things. So it was just really good fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so nice to meet people in person as well, for the people that we did manage to meet, because it's a bit different being on the screen. And even if you have had meetings with somebody repeatedly over quite an extended period of time, no one's ever quite what you imagine them to be when you actually meet them in real life. So that was nice. So I got to meet Frankie in person, and we'd had quite a few conversations before, so that was really nice.
That again? Sorry.
Frankie, who you interviewed last night. And obviously, Sean Baker and Georgia and a few others as well. And then there were just so many. It was just so nice to have people come up to speak to me as well, just to say that their mental health has improved significantly since they changed their diet, and they're kind of doing the best they can to convince family and friends to think about changing their diet for mental health reasons. So yeah, it's just really nice.
So is there anyone that you would say you were most excited to meet? Can I pin you down on anyone, or top three anyway?
Gosh, I don't know. So top three, it would be it would be Georgia, Sean Baker, and Ben Bickman. Those
I
would
knew
be
you were
my
going to say
top three.
that.
Predictable.
Could have had bets on that one.
Yeah, I
Um,
know.
and then, yeah, so my kind of last question is for you as someone who's in the NHS and working as a psychiatrist, how much value do you think you got out of it just that you could take away and use in your own activities and your own work daily? Is that something you feel you benefited from in a professional way as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. So, although, oh gosh, also, although I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to metabolic health, so it's mostly what I think about and read about and research into. There was definitely still quite a few very pertinent takeaways for me, and it's really nice to actually just go to an event where the continuing professional development is relevant to something that I'm developing within the NHS. So I've started off a metabolic psychiatry clinic within the NHS, just small scale just now. So it's just me doing that. But it'll be
That's
really
great.
nice to be able to take that learning back to my peer group when we meet, for example, and just speak to everybody about all of the well kind of renowned and researched speakers that were at the meeting and some of the take home messages and share that
Mm.
learning amongst other colleagues. So.
Is that anything you can share with people, or is it something that's just local to where you are at the moment?
So yeah, so it's just very small scale just now, but it's at the moment it's just open to people that I've seen, so who've come through the crisis service work, who have opted to start a ketogenic diet in terms of optimizing their mental health. So it's just a way for me to follow those people up, and then we might be able to grow that clinic to open it up to other people within the local service,
Mm-hmm.
and there'll be a research angle to it. So hopefully I'll have sort of data in the next 6 months or a year's
Oh, that's
time
really
to
exciting.
share on that. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's all the questions that I have. It's been really great to just to chat to you and to talk through all of that and relive it again with someone who was there. So
Yeah.
hopefully people enjoy that conversation, and we might have a couple more of these just till we all get back down from up in the clouds, and then we can start talking and thinking about next year's, which will be exciting as well.
Yeah.
So
Looking
so
forward to
yeah.
it already.
Yeah, I think hopefully a lot of people will come back again because we had a good time, didn't we? So
Yeah, I imagine
so thanks
you'll
again.
just I imagine you'll just get more people the next time, because I assume probably the majority who came to this one will come back again for
Yeah,
more. So
hopefully. And many
yeah,
people even said we didn't even know it was happening,
yeah,
which we were telling
yeah.
everyone for a long time. But as people do start to spread the word more, there will be more growth from people just organically hearing about
Yeah,
it.
to be honest, I hadn't really been aware of PhD until the last 6 months, I would say. So it was completely off my
Yeah,
radar, and yeah, so yeah, we could definitely get the word out a bit more even
yeah,
still.
absolutely. That's what we have to do. So bigger, better next year, even again. So anyway, I'll let you go and give you a Friday night back. But thanks for chatting, Rachel, and I'm sure we will catch up soon at
Yeah,
some point. Have
sounds
a great
great. Lovely speaking to you.
weekend. Thanks
Thank
everybody for
you.
joining. Bye.
Bye, everyone.